Hello everyone, I'm going to pick up here from where I left off in my previous video, and which was entitled Are You a Moral Nihilist, or Twisted and Sadistic Positive Utilitarian, or an Antinatalist? And I'm picking up here from where I left off when I was talking to a poster by the name of Gand, and I acknowledged that he made an astute reply, but I had issues with him saying that he just used the term quite engaging for the Benatarian asymmetry. So in my next post, I attempt to show him that it's a robust, strong, unambiguous asymmetry. So I butter him up. I say, he's a clever chap. Well, he is a clever chap. I can see that just by the comment he made earlier. I asked him to look at the dialogue I quoted from the Philosophy Forum debate I initiated, and I said, that's unambiguous projection right there for the world to see. Let's brush up on our psychology. Psychological projection or projection bias is a psychological defense mechanism where a person unconsciously denies his or her attributes, thoughts and emotions, and I put in brackets, generated by the unambiguous recognition of the pointlessness of the human condition, which are then ascribed to the outside world, such as to other people or objects, and I put again in brackets the video I made. I say, people betray their true feelings so easily. We all know the terrible harsh truths of our own existence. That's why Shakespeare's Hamlet resonates so deeply within our souls. It's just these truths are buried under a pile of primitive and easily recognizable psychological defense mechanisms. The majority of the human race, I don't think, could sit at all comfortably with the idea of reproducing if they knew that all they're really doing is satisfying their own selfish, animalistic need to procreate, and that it can never be in the interest of the new sentient life that they are creating. People may fantasize about the singularity or some other kind of phantasmagorical, nod to Gary, hideous achievement, but we all know that technology is a two-edged sword. When we create technology, we are putting a part of our irrationality into that mix, and if we are going to invest computers with intelligence that is derived from our irrationality, then the ethical consequences could be horrific. Perhaps we would be like gods in a meaningful sense if we saturated the universe with our intelligence, as is seriously proposed by scientists at the current time. But it's all undignified and contrived, and it involves stepping on other people's corpses in order to transcend into something that we would not even recognize as our own species. And what would we do with our newfound immortality? Create new universes with new planets and new sentient life who are capable of suffering as much as we currently are? That's a comforting thought. Some people are just evil and sadistic. Give them access to these technologies and they will create a dystopia of horror. How can you safeguard against that? People who want all this are mad, and they're messing about with something without knowing the possible outcomes of what they're doing. I know that voicing these things might lead some people to think that I've been smoking crack or something, but they are all consistent with what futurologists predicts may be possible in the future. My point is, why bother with all this nonsense when we could just make non-suffering human sentience the only meaningful thing we should be working towards? No one gets executed, we just educate one another about basic morality and sing a poignant song as the light gently dims and the human sorrow and pointless strife and struggle and strain and agony and misery finally comes to a graceful end in a game we could never ever win. Am I really such a monster for saying this? I think not. There is honour in that, as well as dignity and wisdom, and being morally accountable for our actions. Much better than just merely striving forward in order to meet a little green alien or some such nonsense. Someone had previously sent the message, do you ever stop to think that if your parents had thought as you do, you wouldn't be here to argue your ridiculous theory? I would suggest taking that to heart and living by that thought, and stop spouting your worthless point of view. And above that comment is the 5 little pictures of this cartoon character who's rolling around on the floor laughing. And I answered, it would have been better for me if they had. This is a valid statement that I have arrived at, excuse me, due to applying disciplined philosophical reasoning to various hypothetical scenarios in which I did and did not come into existence. Such deep objective contemplation involves unbundling oneself of the ego that often gets in the way of being able to think rationally about deep ontological issues that transcend our petty subjective, I just enjoyed a nice cold glass of beer mental states of everyday life. And I also wrote to him, after quoting his quote above, this is one of the major problems of blind crude forces, shaping human beings' psyches into objects that are engineered to survive and reproduce at any cost. Morality, or having a truthful appraisal of reality, are bottom of the list in her list of priorities. We need to augment the pitiful amount of altruism and empathy that Mother Nature, also known as bitch, furnished our minds with, and act out the wisest and most compassionate act of all. We are an irrational species, and we are throwing our children into this pitiless universe in order to decay and die for absolutely no rational reason whatsoever. Your chuckles of derision are an affront to all the suffering in the world that you would see if you only opened your eyes and stared unflinchingly into the horror that is the reality of the human condition. I'm speaking on these issues after having studied the philosophy and the psychology that one needs in order to see reality in a more honest light than you. Your depth of analysis is utterly barren. You have a Homer Simpson approach when it comes to thinking logically about existence and the human condition. Your irrationality could cause enormous suffering to your offspring if you needlessly have them. You are like zealous Christians who burn witches at the stake, unaware that your reasons for doing so were utterly vacuous of reason or good sense. The majority of the human race is caught up in a mass psychosis, as it were, a truly grotesque and repugnant spectacle, and I cannot just sit here and not speak out against it. He'd earlier replied to me, roll eyes, pretentious self-important rhetoric, you really do need to get a life, a fact I find mildly amusing given your opinions. So it's just a ad hominem attack. And I reply, my opinions, as you so nonchalantly dismiss them, are informed by logically sound premises and the conclusions that naturally flow from them. Watch my video above that I posted a link to and tell me honestly they have no bearing on how we should objectively appraise our moral obligation to have or not have children. You just form knee-jerk reactions to ideas and concepts and then dismiss me as being pretentious because I actually apply my intelligence to profound ethical issues. The morality of procreation is the most important pressing ethical issue that anyone could ever discuss, and thus requires precise and accurate language so that the person you are communicating with on the issue clearly understands what it is that you are saying. It is not pretentious, therefore, to adopt this form of speech when discussing complex and abstract philosophical ideas. I would not speak to you like this if we were watching a football match together in a pub. I would say something like, alright mate, what you think of the new 4-3-3 setup then, man? That primitive form of speech is perfectly appropriate for that scenario, but we are discussing philosophy here, a lot of which can be counterintuitive, but this does not render it a suitable target for your scorn, just because you are incapable of applying your brain to issues much more complex than the taste of a bacon sandwich, yummy, nice, or how attractive you find a woman's arse. Fwah! I'm slowly accumulating a large body of research that undeniably demonstrates that it is a selfish and aggressive act to bear children, and all you can do is scoff at me and play the I don't like what you're saying so it must be bullshit card. Pathetic. That's what I wrote. Somebody agrees with my philosophical stance here. He says, agreed, the act of procreation has little to do with the welfare of future siblings. It just happens and you've got to be responsible for a good or otherwise shag. And for those non-native English speakers who are unfamiliar with the colloquial term shag, I recommend you watch Austin Powers. Okay. So someone says we are born and we reproduce and we die. Might be a mistake to read too much into it. And I reply, it would be easier for me to accept it if people at least made an effort to actually understand my arguments, instead of just pouring scorn and contempt on me. The juxtaposition of their view that, wow, humans are just so great, and the sickening way they hide and cower from the fundamental issues of existence sickens me. If they saw themselves truly for what they were, if they saw themselves truly for what they were behind their laughably transparent lies and self-deceptions, they would be horrified. It wouldn't surprise me if there is a worldwide repression of antinatalism going on by the powers that be. That could explain the equally irrational and repugnant common practice of denying a dignified death to people when they most need it. I got banned from a philosophy forum the other day because I'm becoming very skilled in arguing my case on this subject, and if someone tries to challenge my views, I invariably tie them up in their own logic. I did so with 3 moderators of said philosophy forum, and they retaliated by first strategically deleting my most astute posts due to poor post quality, ha ha. Then they moved it to the pseudo-philosophy zone, and then they just banned me outright, all in the space of about 2 days. I guess I should take that as an unintentional compliment from them, but I've got enough material to undermine their ridiculous charade of doing real philosophy, and will cast it on YouTube. And you guys will see that when I finish my debate with Benki, who calls himself a cold hard bastard. Okay, I thank him for the gentle words of advice. I say, I don't think, however, that it's possible to read too much into all this unnecessary suffering and insanity when you can see the issue as clearly as I can. The only thing I can try to do is cultivate some more of the irrationality that is required in order to be able to function normally without just seeing a monstrous, grotesque and ugly spectacle that is the human race scurrying around the planet thinking they are just so important, and that the whole damn universe is wholly contingent on our existence. It's just watered down atheism. Someone would say, I would argue that I would argue that our population is totally out of control on this planet, but I wouldn't stop people having children at all. This is a place for us, but it is a case of finding the right balance, and currently we are more of a pest than anything else. I reply, this is just a subjective opinion which is not informed by a consideration of the arguments that I have so elegantly and cogently put forward, or by a consideration of the thought experiment I presented to you at the start of this thread. Newsflash. Truth is not merely a popularity contest. Your lack of willingness to actually engage with my arguments or comment on my observations is telling. I don't understand why everyone should be so trustful of their intuitive feelings when they are considering these issues. Has it not occurred to anyone that the mind is an evolving tool, and that we are merely pawns in an irrational game of chase the cheese and the pink unicorns? Another nod to Gary. You have the temerity to impose sentience on other living, breathing, defecating, suffering Homo sapien animals without once considering if the person you are bringing into existence actually needs or desires any of the things you so disingenuously cite as reasons for bringing them into existence. You then contemptuously sneer at other people if they raise objections to being born, and callously remark, if life is so bad, why don't you just kill yourself? All the while knowing that we are designed by Mother Nature to abhor the notion of our not existing anymore, even though rationally it makes perfect sense to end your misery after someone has thrusted you into it without so much as a word of consent from you, and who then ironically and perversely calls it the gift of life. Well, I'm coming up to 15 minutes there, so I'll end the video here. Let's hope I can switch this thing off quicker and in a more dignified manner than I managed last time.